This is Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast that explores different areas of the arts and culture of production with me, Paula Blair. Visit patreon.com/AV Cultures to find out more and to join the pod. I am really pleased to be joined across the Atlantic and very far across the whole continent by Justin McAleece. Hello, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. You're going to talk to us about your work in directing and cinematography, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's quite a lot of areas we can get into. It'd be interesting to think about the relationship or maybe the differences between working for yourself and being someone for hire in film and television. And you work across quite a lot of media, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different types of videos we do for a lot of different types of clients. And sometimes we are the client. So yeah, just like you're saying, depending on who's your boss, there's a variety of reasons you would want it to be one way or the other.
The sorts of work that you do, we're talking music videos, commercials for television, feature-length films, and you work across different genres. I've seen you've done some documentary and mockumentary.
Yeah, exactly. And then I would add to that a lot of what we do is corporate video production. So that's a lot of that's talking heads. You know, we go to a company and they have some new information about some new products or new things that they're moving into, different sectors within their company, that sort of thing. And we talk to them and do interviews and B-roll. So a lot of what we do ends up being that, which is great because they have a story to tell and we can get it out there. And those oftentimes, you know, for anyone who's looking to go into video production, I would never ignore that because they have some money to spend. They know what they want. They're generally not, what would you say? Everything's not riding on that one video. Whereas when you do say like a local commercial for a company, that's a huge deal to them. And then you're much more worried that they're going to get every dime out of it. Whereas if you're working for a Fortune 500 company and they're putting together a video, that's just one of many things that they're going to do. And so there's a little less pressure to guarantee things that you can't really guarantee. When you're talking about local commercials, it's a little bit of a different situation in that regard.
Gosh, that's really interesting. Yes, I don't think I've ever spoken to somebody who makes corporate videos, and these would be something that would be contained within the company. Is that right?
Yeah, some are internal, some are external. It sort of depends what it is. A lot of things we're doing these days because of COVID is internal to whereas we are making something just to show to all the shareholders or all the employees or all at a company meeting that they would normally have in person, but now they're not doing that. So that's a lot of what it has been recently just this year. But in general, it's forward facing. It's out on YouTube, on their webpage. A lot of them are explainer videos, you know, to where a salesperson takes it out or would email it to people and they're like, well, what do you do? And we're like, well, here's a 3-minute video showing you exactly what we do. So we specialize in that. And I think that's pretty useful.
Do you think that sort of format is very different in production from the other kinds of work that you do?
I think that there are parallels in just about everything we do. You get to take more artistic license, certainly on, say, a music video or your own short film where you can do anything you want. But, you know, that's the double-edged sword of anything creative is when you get all the ability to do whatever you want, then it is much harder to make a decision. You get that option paralysis, which tends to be an issue. Whereas when you're working with a client, or let's say you have an agency and then you're working with a video production company inside of that agency, and then they have a client, then a lot of the decisions are already made for you in sort of a freeing sort of way. It's the opposite of what you would think sometimes. It's a little bit counterintuitive. You know, they've already decided what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, who the people are, what the props are, all that stuff. You get to go in there and optimize that. So you know exactly what your sandbox is. Whereas when you're making something for yourself, who knows what the sandbox could be in, so it gets a little overwhelming at times. I think there are definitely good things about both or any of the different ways, you know, within that you could be able to do work and do good work.
I imagine that variety really keeps things interesting. You wouldn't get bored easily.
Yeah, it helps me because it is a bit taxing to be able to do all your own stuff, because then there's no one on the line but you. And, you know, and you have to do soup to nuts on everything. And then you just get tired at the end of the day. And there's a lot more chance for what do you want to say? Maybe imposter syndrome or thinking like, what am I even doing here? This sucks. And no one's going to see this for a while. This is a mess, Whereas if you're doing it for someone else, then after every shot, they're like, oh, that was good. Let's move on to the next one. You're like, good, accomplished. I did it. Something's great. We can move on. It's just a different idea.
Yeah, it'd be good to talk about your work involved with music, because you do make a lot of music videos and you've made music documentaries. Would you be happy to talk us through some of that, please? And maybe similarities and differences, and maybe working with musicians and collaboration?
Yeah, absolutely. Music videos are fun because all bets are off in a lot of ways. You have a lot more room for creativity. They also often are longer days or more complicated days. You're trying to fit more things into less time a lot of times. Sometimes you're dealing with people who have never done a video before. So this might be the first time that an artist is venturing into this, which can get a little complicated. And then they have something in their mind that might not actually pan out on screen. You're also dealing with the fact that you want to do something original and what do you want to say? You want to break the mold with these people, but you also can't really do that because you have to fit within the certain criteria of what they think a music video should be. And a lot of times, a lot of music in general is people finally getting to the point where they could produce the thing that they liked 10 years ago. That's the reason a lot of music feels like you may have heard it before, just because a lot of people grow up liking songs or, when they were 20 or whatever, they had their favorite band, and then 30 and then 10 years later, maybe they're able to actually make that same music. So you end up in a situation where not only are they producing music that is somewhat similar, maybe their own twist on it of something that had come before, but they also probably want the video of the thing that they had seen at the time, but just slightly updated. So there's some dynamics at play there that are a little complicated because you want to do something brand new, but you also want to do something that harkens back to what that music is to the rest of the people who would be listening to that song. So there's a lot of requirements in making a music video to make it fresh but classical. You're always arguing with yourself between those two things, and there's a lot of things you can do visually to get those accomplished. You're also trying to get the artists themselves front and center. Having what you would say, a very concept-y video. I don't know if you've ever seen a Tool video, for instance, but you don't really see Tool, the band, in any of the Tool videos, and it's all this claymation and all this other stuff. That may work for certain bands, but it's not going to work for a lot of them who this might be their only time to get in front of the camera. So you're beholden to a lot of things while making a music video that you wouldn't maybe think that you were. You're like, well, we'll just go do this thing. It'll be easy. And it's a little more complicated than that.
Moving from those short form types of films and videos to something longer form, so the likes of music documentaries, and you've made one, The Art of Organized Noise, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So I wasn't the director on that. I was
Sure.
I was one of the cinematographers, but that was a lot of fun. We got to do a lot in a very short amount of time, which was great because documentaries can often consume a lot of time. But we were able to knock out a bunch of interviews. We ended up shooting about half of it, maybe more than that, of the final documentary in a short amount of time, which was great. And we met some famous people and we heard some just really interesting stories. Something that I didn't understand how that part of the business worked. I didn't know the stories behind any of those songs. There's a couple very famous songs. Certainly Outkast, the rap group out of the dirty South, out of Georgia and Atlanta. They're a big part of that story. The first song that they did was the song Waterfalls by TLC. That was their first one that hit big. So everyone sort of knows that song. Yeah, and it was a great place to be. They have this place called the Dungeon, and it was just pretty fascinating. So working on something like that, we go in there and we try to get as much as we can. We try to make it look to have a certain vibe throughout. So we pick some gels, to get a little technical. We fell into some specific colors that we wanted that stuff to be and made it a little moodier than I would normally shoot maybe, and had it more shadowy, more saturated, more punchy than some things we end up doing. And, that looks totally different than a commercial you would put on TV, but you try to get some gravity out of the visuals and out of the cinematography that you're putting into it. And hopefully that connects with the viewer and it feels maybe something like that they had seen before out of another band or group or rap artist that they had seen, to where they can be like, oh, I get it. This is like the same level, if not bigger than that. Like, this makes sense to me. I understand what I'm watching and why I'm watching it. That's what you're always trying to do. You're trying to put people in a place and connect with something that a shared experience previously, and then twist twist it on its head a little bit. That's sort of the role of a storyteller. Remind them of something that they already are familiar with so that you can pull it, take it back, twist it, and give it back to them to where they feel like it's new.
Do you find that if you're working as a cinematographer, there's a difference between working in fiction or something more structured and planned? Any differences between that and a documentary where you're filming really in the moment and it's a live event that you're capturing? Do you think there are differences, or is it you do what you're told to do, or how much license do you have?
Typically, we have a decent amount of license, I would say, in terms of how it's lit and what the overall approach is. A lot of that's being decided ahead of time, though. Hopefully, when you get on set, a lot of your decisions are already made because you've made them with the producer, the director, the writer, whoever it happens to be. And you already know what you're trying to accomplish. And I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. It's not like, oh, what do I want to do in this situation? That's like a very fourth tier sort of concept. You want to be like, what serves the story? What will help the director accomplish the most amount of information in the least amount of time? And really, that's what you're trying to do. David Fincher, American director, has a quote, like basically my job as a director is deciding what information to give out when. And that's really what directing is about. And by proxy, that's what cinematography is about, is putting people with a sense of what the context is, what the vital information about a frame is, and where to lead their eye, and how to feel about it subconsciously without even attempting to tell them why they feel about a certain way with the actors or the dialogue or the action or any of that stuff. Just like, 1 second in, you're like, oh, I get what this is. So that's really what you're attempting to do in all cases. I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but that's our job.
No, that's really useful. I think you have been working on projects quite recently, haven't you? Are you seeing any real differences in the current climate with things? I mean, I don't know exactly how things are with you. You're in California, is that right?
Yeah.
In the UK, we're on quite a major lockdown at the moment with COVID. I don't know how things are with you. We hear not great things about the US, but but all the states are different, I think. So I don't really know what's going on.
No, they definitely get to choose their own path in a lot of ways. We are somewhat locked down. A lot of the things are still not open. A lot of businesses, it is not life as usual by any stretch of the imagination. But what we're able to do is go out and shoot with small crews, with masks, with taking precautions, making sure that we got antibacterial stuff standing by. Once we do that, we're in decent shape. I haven't been on any sets where anyone's been sick, and I haven't heard of anyone being sick related to those sets that I've had anything to do with. So we have a 100% track record as far as I can tell so far, which is pretty great. And yeah, as long as you're careful, as long as you're wearing your mask, as long as you're being aware of all the criteria, then I think it's okay. We've definitely been doing other stuff than we normally would. We've done a bit more live stuff, live switching between multiple cameras. We've done more like I was saying, the CEO comes on, he does a stand up. We're going to do something on Thursday, tomorrow, of someone, being there and just talking to the rest of the company, basically. And so the types of things we've shot has changed a bit. And we're not doing any big movies. There were some things that we had planned on doing that we can't do yet. But we should be engaged in one of those in February, March, that I'm very much looking forward to. So we'll see as the timing changes how that all develops. But yeah, it's a weird world out there.
Could I ask you as well about your production company? It's Blair Media, that's right. Just a bit of background about how you go about establishing such a company and what people's roles are, that sort of thing.
Sure, yeah. So we've been Blair Media for about 15 years now. It's been quite a while. 2005, 2004, somewhere in there we started. It is a lot of work to keep a video production company going, especially at first. It gets easier as it goes along, I think, as with most things. It's important, you got to think of it as a normal startup of anything. It's like you have to put in a ton of time to do everything you can, do it yourself. A lot of times, you don't get to hire other editors or other people doing data. Like one thing that has changed over my time is not having to worry about all the hard drive stuff as much as I used to, because I have other people doing that. So having someone maybe not solely focused on that, but being able to make sure that all that stuff is getting done properly saves me from having to be there every Sunday night until 2 a.m. worried about where all the data is and what hard drives it's on and all these other things. So that's definitely in video production, when you're producing just an incredible amount of data, that's something to be aware of, much like it is to be aware of your taxes and your accounting stuff. Those are things that that's not my job per se, but I have to worry about it as a small business owner. And so getting people from the start and getting that ironed out as much as possible from the start. I think we made some mistakes here and there of not, maybe it's just one of those things you could put on the back burner. Like, we have a shoot, we have a shoot, we have a shoot, we have a shoot. 6 months down the line, you're like, oh, we should have been worried about this thing a little bit more, and making sure that we had our priorities straight in terms of that. But it's always a push pull. You're trying to make a buck so that you can pay the man, so you can pay out your people, so that you can give them more money. And there are a lot of contingencies there that all have to fall in place simultaneously to have a successful company. So you're always fighting for that. It's a long road, but I think once you establish it well enough, then it does sort of become self-perpetuating to an extent, which is great.
Good, great stuff. It'd be really great now to turn to the really big project that you've had for a while of your own, Brick Madness, and to talk a bit about your film. I mean, so you've done so much work where you're working for other people, but is it right that this is really your baby, this one?
Yeah, definitely my baby, along with some of my other friends and family. But yeah, 2009, we were on the set of another movie. We were thinking that we really wanted to do one of our own things. In our inestimable hubris, we're saying that, like, hey, this should be easy. We'll get this done in a few weeks. We'll show everyone else how easy it is and simple it's going to be to make a feature film. And that was 11 years ago. And so here we are with the movie. It has finally been distributed. We entered into pre-sales a couple weeks ago. December 22nd, it will be on Amazon. And so really excited about that. Shortly thereafter, it'll be on the other assorted SVOD, TVOD, AVOD, all the other stuff that you would normally find movies on. Yeah. It'll be in a bunch of those places. So we're looking forward to that. It's a comedy. It's a 99-minute comedy about a national Lego tournament. In our world, we call them bricks. So it's a mockumentary. It's a fake documentary. And we had just an incredible fun time doing it. I think it shows up on screen. I think the ebullience of our participation in it with my friends and family, I think I really got something out of it. I hope they feel the same way. And we've really heard from other people watching, like, it feels like a documentary. I did another podcast a couple weeks ago, and one of the guys, there's two hosts on it, and he'd called up the other host after watching part of the movie, and he's like, he was Canadian. He's like, this is an actual documentary, right? And the other guy's like, no, it's a fake documentary. It's all made up. And he's like, my mind is my head's bleeding, dude. There's no way. This has to be a real thing. He's like, no, dude, it's all made up. No way. And so I was like, that's cool. I'm really glad that they got that sort of impression out of it, that it could have been real, that it could have been, actual people doing these actual quirky, weird things with their life. I'm real proud of that. And I've heard that before. It's fun. It's entertaining, and we put a lot of time into it. So we want people out there to watch it and enjoy it. I think it's, I stand fully behind it, and I'm like, no, this is a fun movie, not just because I made it, but I think I would like it regardless. So there's that.
Yeah. You made something that you want to watch yourself.
Yeah. Tarantino said that, that someone asked him, like, what's your favorite movie? And he said, the one I just made. That's why I made it. So I think there's a little bit of wisdom in that. And, like, why would you be making something that you didn't want to see? That seems stupid. That's not saying it's the best. That's just saying it's my favorite. I think that's a fun place to be, at least.
Recently, there's been a documentary series on Netflix about the history of gaming. Oh, I can't remember what it's called now, but it's really, really good. There are episodes where the arcades got really popular, and there are these massive tournaments. And it reminded me of that, actually, the footage that they showed of that, of all these kids piling into these venues to start playing arcade games and tournaments.
Yeah, I haven't clicked on that. I have a nasty habit of not wanting to see anyone do what I'm doing before I'm fully done with it, that sort of thing. And I get a lot of the resentment rages in me when I'm like, oh man, my thing's not done yet, but this thing's even better. Screw you guys. So sometimes I don't watch stuff like that. I try to watch stuff that's like totally different from what I'm doing. But yeah, that's such as the life of an artist, or maybe it's just me, I don't know. But it's always rough to see your babies being reared by other people, other parents, I guess is what it is. But yeah, I know about that show. I think I clicked on it for about 30 seconds one time. I was like, oh, this looks cool. I'll watch that later.
It's a good one. But yeah, those tournaments really reminded me of that. And it's interesting because that was really new technology that they're giving you, and it's archival footage. Whereas with bricks, and you're dealing with Lego, this is something that's been around for decades now, and the enthusiasm of that, and the characters, and the hubris, and the excitement, and
it's just fun. They're into it. It's their own thing. They love being a part of it, and it's their whole world to them. I think anytime you can dissect life and really find something that you feel like is your world and you're a part of it and you're meant to be there and you can participate in it without fear of reprisal from anyone around you. I like that's just a great thing. And so, the idea of nerd or geek or, whatever that happens to be, it's like that's such a silly concept in a lot of ways. And we try to sort of dispel that stuff within it and get to the heart of what people like and why they like it. And furthermore, like this is just an art form. It's just an art form like anything else, like painting or guitar, or, learning to write music or learning to write a story. Like those are all various forms of expressing your soul through a medium. Hopefully, I mean, that's the transcendent version of it. And this is the exact same thing. They just happen to be using a quote unquote toy. But then you're like, well, that seems like a double whammy. Then that's awesome. Not only do you get to be artistic and do something that allows you to express yourself, but you get to use a toy while doing it. And it's fun and colorful and interesting. And like inherently, like you get to collect the things you love while doing the art, while using a toy. Like it's a really pretty brilliant field. And I think that speaks to why it's so popular.
And it's something that involves skill. I never really thought of Lego as being competitive before, but...
And it's not really like that's sort of our spin on it. I mean, you have to have a winner and a loser in a movie like this, but they do some competitions. And obviously like they have these other TV shows that are out now. Fox did a whole series about it. And so that's a whole nother twist on what we had done sort of before that, obviously, they're like, oh, you've seen that show? And I was like, screw that show. I don't want to watch that show yet. Wait till the movie's out and I made $1 million. Then maybe I'll watch that show. But yeah, that's how it is.
What about your creative decisions? Did you want to have it as something fly on the wall where it's just observational and coming across as if they're not aware of the camera? Or is it a kind of thing they're very aware of the camera and they're performing to it a bit? How is the, because I've just seen short clips of it so far.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we were trying to go, you got to remember, we were shooting this around 2012. A lot of the footage came from 2011, 2012 era. So we were approaching it, I would say, in the way that The Office is shot, at least the American version of The Office, to where there's some characters that play to camera occasionally. So, like how Jim would look at the camera and he is aware that it is there. But most of the time, it's just sort of happening. And I think what we tried to do, we were really, at least I was, really critically aware of the idea that like, we don't want to put a camera where it can't be. We don't want to listen to a conversation that we wouldn't be able to hear. We don't want to be in a place where as filmmakers, we would have no reason to be there. So we were definitely trying to fix that as we went along. And there were a number of times where like, it would be so easy in a real movie just to solve this thing right here. Like all you would have to do is show a shot of that because you have the God view and you can see anything you want while you're in a movie, it'll be fine. And we're like, yeah, but you can't, why would anyone shoot that? There's no reason at this point in this plot for a camera to be getting footage of that. So it doesn't make any sense. So we can't do it. So we have to figure out an alternate way. So it was harder than we thought to not break our own rules that we set for ourselves. But I hope that had some effect on why exactly the guy I was talking about would be like, yeah, that's a real thing, right? That's a real documentary. And I think that's how we accomplished that, if indeed we did.
There are parts, are there, where somebody's being interviewed? Is it as if they're being interviewed and they're talking about the other guys? Yeah.
We have quite a bit of interviews and some of that is real. Some of that is scripted and a lot of that is made up on the spot. But what we did was we went to actual Lego conventions. So we went to a thing called Bricks by the Bay in Santa Clara here in the Silicon Valley in California. And we talked to people that were already there that other people knew. They're what they call adult fan of Lego, AFOLs. So we would talk to them and be like, hey guys, all right, so you understand who a good guy is, who a bad guy is, how this world went down. Okay, Max Gran, he's great, but something weird happened to him in the past. You don't really know what it is, but it revolves around this idea of gluing, and that's terrible. And so talk to me a little bit about that. And then so they just sort of make up their own story based on what that was, and we'd sort of guide them in a little bit different direction. So we weren't putting words in their mouth so much as getting them to tell the story from their own point of view, which was really great because then it felt real and organic, as if they were coming up with it, as if they had lived through it. And that's what we were trying to do, was not only weave people that other people within the Lego community would know, but also have them reflect on it in their own manner. I can't write for that person. I don't know that person. I don't know what character that person is. So we want them to be able to talk from their own ability to be themselves, which I cannot emulate. That was our intent.
And do you think this is quite a community of people? And, what kind of backgrounds do people come from and ages? Are they very different, all of them, and they're all united by this one thing? How does it work?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate way to say it. I went to 5 different conventions in 2018 and talked to a bunch of people and had a whole bunch of people watch the movie at those situations, and it was great. And I would say that they're what you would think that culture would be in some ways, meaning that I would say they are not traditionally extroverted people. They're a little withdrawn here and there. You certainly have your people that are out there and having fun and a little bit different, but this is their world to get out of their shell, because they are among friends and they are among people who are into the same thing they are. I was sort of an outsider in that situation, so I think I got to see both sides, which was interesting. They do vary in range. I mean, Lego's an expensive hobby too. So it's not like you have a bunch of maybe say 15-year-olds with cubic meters worth of Lego that would be able to fill a whole room and actually make these big, great creations to show off. So it's an expensive hobby. So you're talking about a lot of middle-aged people, men and women. We sort of lampoon that in the movie too by showing basically one main woman that's one of the contenders in it. And that's the idea, is like there's only one, and so she has this weird dynamic within our world. And that's not entirely true, but there's a little bit of that certainly in the Lego world. Not a bad thing. It just happens to be who's into what. It's a great community. They've been really nice to me. All the conventions that let me go out there was really great. And Bricks Fiesta, I did a keynote speech that was super fun. And yeah, everyone's been really great.
Well, what was it that drew you to doing it about Lego in the first place?
I remember when I was a kid, how much I loved it. Still do, but I used to play a lot when I was 10, 12, 13. And we wanted something originally, because you start out with these sort of broad strokes while you're creating a story. You're like, okay, what are we going to do? What's this movie about? Well, let's do it about, I want to do a mockumentary. Cool. All right. Well, what do you want to do about it? And you're like, well, most mockumentaries have to have some sort of competition in them. Great. What do you know about that you could do about competitions? And you're like, well, we're artistic, but then we also want to have something that I have access to. I don't know. Let's do Lego. Okay, cool. And so it's like the first conversation. And unless you realize that's a total dead end, you sort of created your world in a very slapdash manner. That doesn't mean it's bad, but that means that you've already put yourself into a corner and then you have to paint yourself out of it. If that metaphor makes sense. But it came very early on, and that was immediately, I was like, yep, that's what we want to do. That's going to work.
And it sounds like an idea that, although it's been a long time coming, this is probably the year that we needed it.
Oh man, I hope so. Yeah. You never know, because I was watching the Lego movie when it came out, and it's a trip because the kid that have you seen the Lego movie?
Yes.
Okay. So if you remember, at the end, there's Will Ferrell, and then there's this other kid. And basically what was happening within the movie was in this kid's world, and Will in this kid's world and whatever. So that kid is Jaden Sand. He's in our movie. He was in our movie before the Lego movie.
Right.
While we were making Brick Madness, he was in it. He did a bunch of scenes. He came back and was in the rest of his scenes, basically. And I was talking to his mom, and she's like, oh, yeah, we were working on something that was also about bricks. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And she didn't tell me anymore, that she was very coy about it, because she has to be, because she signs NDAs and all that. And I was like, oh, neat, cool, some little thing, whatever. Yeah, I'm sure this will be much bigger and better. And then, I go to the theater and I was like, son of a bitch, Jaden, look at this. This is insane. They spent like $1 billion. It's so good. This movie's awesome. And so I'm just like depressed, and this sucks. And and that was a long time ago too. And it still took a long time to come out. So it's like, you never know. Hopefully in 2014, we were ahead of our time and it wasn't going to work. And now it's going to work better. You do what you can do to make what you can, and you put it out when it happens. We made some mistakes and could have got it done sooner. I made some mistakes, but it is what it is. You try to push through.
But it shows that you were onto something, that there was some interest in the subject matter, so that in a way, if you want to take a positive out of it, you were in the right direction.
was a
direction.
trendsetter without even knowing it and without
Exactly.
actually setting any trends.
It's
Yeah.
just you're this silent voice in the void.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's my dad, you're like, well, I just thought of something, Dad. I just came up with something. And, when we were kids, it would be like, you don't think of things. Those are just floating around in the air. You just grab them. Ideas are just everywhere. You didn't come up with an idea. That's just there. It's in the ether. I was like, all right, I guess. Then I grabbed an idea and he's like, all right, is it a good one? You're like, yeah. He's like, okay, do something with it. So I think that's what I've always sort of thought about ideas anyway. And that's the thing too. You want to love your ideas. They say kill your babies. I do and I don't agree with that. I think you have to dispel things that aren't quite going to work, but you really want to. But you also have to fight for the things that aren't quite working yet, but you really think will. And so it goes both ways. That's the eternal struggle of creativity, I think. Deciding what to jettison and deciding what to champion. Those are very difficult decisions because they are amorphous and who knows what's right.
I mean, it's really refreshing to hear you talking about mistakes. I mean, how do we know that we're getting things right if we don't mess it up every now and again and have something to learn from, and there's so much pressure, I think, on creatives to get it right and to be doing it really well all of the time. But you need those learning curves, don't you? And you need to be allowed to fail sometimes. And failure is actually a good thing. And we should be allowed, I think, to recognize that, really learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. We did a sort of a corporate video for a school, and these are second, third, fourth, fifth graders, and they talked a lot about failure and how it was good and useful and an important part of the learning process. And I think they were combating the concept that a lot of kids growing up today are like have never really like internalized what it felt to fail, felt like to fail, and because they had always been you get a participation ribbon, even if you get last. And that makes it seem like no matter what, you sort of won. And that's not how life works. And so I think we're preparing young people for a life that doesn't exist when we're just giving out participation ribbons no matter what. And graduating from kindergarten, suddenly you have a big party. And I'm like, why are we having a party? That's for the parents. That's not for the kids. That doesn't even make sense. And so I think, along that lines, you have to learn how to fail and how to just understand that what you did maybe wasn't good enough. Like you tried and you gave it your best effort and it wasn't enough. And so go back and try again and be stronger the next time around. Obviously, it's important to learn that. Fail forward. That's what they say here in the Silicon Valley, especially. Fail forward, fail often, fail early, fail often. And that way you can get them all out of the way.
Justin, are there any other areas of your practice that you would like to talk about today that we haven't touched on yet?
What do people ask you questions about? I mean, do you get much feedback, that sort of thing? Have you had previous guests that have touched on a topic, but maybe not really dove into it to the level that you wanted?
We deal with quite a wide variety of things. And I suppose what I try to do with every episode is to try and really drill down on things and to mine out as much information as we can to try and, because I try and have an educational focus to the podcast, as well as this thing's really interesting and it connects this other thing. When I do get the chance to talk to practitioners in different media, the things that they learn, and there's always something, because I'm more from a theory background of studying film, and I have a bit of practice experience but not really very much, and so it's just always really fascinating to hear how it really works in different areas, different ways of working, different ways of problem solving, so it's just great to just hear you talking about, how do you get around certain problems, how do you impose limitations on yourself so that you don't meander off and it doesn't make sense anymore. It's great to talk to somebody who's made documentary and mockumentary.
Yeah, totally. And we have another documentary coming out and it's called Better. So that's happening in January. And that's way different than Brick Madness. It's an actual real thing about a very important subject, diabetes. So that's diabetes and obesity, which are run along the same path almost always. That's the biggest epidemic we've ever faced health-wise. I mean, it's not a pandemic in the same way that Corona is, but it's, the biggest thing that's happening, especially in westernized societies. So talking about that, talking about the shame that comes along with having overweight, talking about how people develop these understandings of what they're supposed to be eating and why, and how oftentimes they're misled and given totally faulty information. That stuff's really important to address in a way that then offers them real answers about what scientifically proven methods of eating are actually going to help you in the long run. And so that's really what we're trying to do on that. I was a director on that. I did a whole bunch of interviews, talked to 4 Harvard doctors and a variety of other people. And we just really wanted to drill down and understand exactly what was at the heart of that and offer answers. We put everything in the movie that we possibly could about what to do, not just what not to do. And so we didn't leave anything on the cutting room floor to where we're like, oh man, we'll save that for the sequel, or we'll keep that so that we could sell it to someone later or whatever. It's like, my goal was just to give people answers. And I really think that's what we did. Furthermore, that's what art is about, hopefully. Either asking profound questions or answering profound questions. I mean, like, that's your job. And usually both.
Yeah, so with that idea of relaying information, maybe we're in very similar places in the UK and the US at the moment, where we've got this idea of post-truth. How reliable is any of the information that we're told? And there's so much pressure on people to be autonomous and take control of their own destinies, their own lives, their own eating habits and that sort of thing, but while being sold things that are very bad for them on a constant loop. And it's really difficult to make certain decisions. And then there's socioeconomic factors and all sorts of things going on. So it's really, again, probably a really prescient time for something like that to be on the way. Yeah,
I hope so. That one feels like that is the best possible time it could come out, is like right now. I really think we're hitting it while the iron is hot, so to speak. Brick Madness, I hope, has the same sort of legs underneath it in terms of that. But like, there's never been a better time to have a movie like Better, in my opinion. A quick question for you, like, what's a healthy food?
Generally vegetables.
Okay, good. Yeah. I mean, that's a good start. Yeah. And so we talk about that, and it's because it's not you being able to, you answered that more quickly than most people.
Okay.
And I would say that quote unquote vegetables, like, that's such a wide variety of thing. And so we center our concept of vegetables and which ones are good specifically on non-starchy vegetables. Okay. So I mean, you can get fat by eating potatoes or just rice or just wheat. Those aren't necessarily, those are vegetables or grains at least, but they fit within a certain category that just because they're a vegetable doesn't mean they're great, but there are vegetables that are the best thing you can eat, essentially. Yeah. And so we dig down on that. We talk about non-starchy vegetables and nutrient-dense proteins, whole food fats, and low fructose fruits in a way that I think hopefully people can like identify those things and really understand, like, not just, well, I heard that this specific thing was really good for you, and like, what does that mean? But be able to drill down and be like, here's exactly why this food would be better than that food. And we try to outline that for people in a really useful manner. Going back to maybe storytelling in general, what you were talking about with regards to, misinformation and people having to draw their own conclusions and all that, I think we've lost the ability to think critically, and it's not necessarily our fault. Like, we're beset by so many things that are trying to take our attention and trying to co-opt our understanding of what we already knew. And I think we're definitely in a time in history that has never been more like that. And some of that is political. It's people trying to convince us something that we knew since time immemorial was one way, and they're trying to say, well, because of these reasons, it's not that way, it's this way now. And so there's a lot of confusion there. In my own personal politics, I definitely grasp, or I definitely, what would you say, have to wage a continuous war against that misinformation. But when you're making a movie, and when you're the writer of a movie, let's say, your job is to give enough information to the director, the producer, so that that person knows exactly what you were trying to accomplish and why, but not how to feel about it, not how to do their job. So when you're writing a story, you want to display the situation as accurately as possible so that the director can then say, here's how I want to tell that story to the audience. But you don't tell them exactly where to put the camera. You don't tell them exactly how to make the actor act or any of those things, right? Because that's the director's job. In the same way, then the director takes that and says, here's how I want to show that to the audience. Because I don't want to ever tell them how to think, but I want to tell them what the situations are so that they can decide how to interpret it. actually you would give that to the actor. So you display that as appropriately as possible. So the actor can then say, I will do my job. I don't want to tell the audience how to think, but I will display to them exactly what the situation is so that they can decide how to think. And then it gets to the audience and they hopefully gather all those things from those three processes, or probably more that came before that. And they don't feel beset by someone else saying, now you feel sad. Now you feel happy. Now this is complicated. Like they don't feel that way. They feel like, oh, this is a real story, a real life situation that I can then get my own understanding of, because then I can connect it to what I feel about as a human in that situation. So now it becomes part of our shared understanding. And that's the critical thinking that I'm talking about in there. And I think that you were sort of referencing is our ability to take input that might not all agree with each other, 1,000 points of data, and get our own deeper, more profound look into what that really means to us. And I think we can't let that go. And that's why reality TV sucks. To divert is because they're constantly telling you exactly what to think about the situation. And that's why it's so, I can't even think of the word. It's such a, in my mind, and we've sort of gotten past a lot of that, but that's why it's so sort of terrible for critical thinking. And I think that those things go hand in hand, are not, maybe not by not mistake is not the right word, but that's not an anomaly, that our decreased level of critical thinking also goes hand in hand with our decreased level of wanting to interpret media in a deep, meaningful manner without being told how to interpret it. So that's my rant. Sorry to go on quite so long, but that's how I view the sort of holistic view of that stuff.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. Don't worry.
It's complicated, and it should be complicated. Like everything should be complicated, except for what food to eat. We figured that one out.
It's very much an aim of this show is to try and help people learn how to analyze the media that they engage with. So that's really useful, Justin. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's important. That's your job. Just like anything, you have to watch something with a critical understanding of the 5,000 things that came before that are influencing why that was done that way.
Yeah, because I think it's so much about, right, well, why is it framed in that way? And why are we seeing that person at the moment? Why are they lit that way? It's asking all of those probing questions to get it an answer. And if it throws up even more questions, all the better. As you say, it's complex, but if you work through the complexity, then you can have a eureka moment and go, oh, that's what's going on, being manipulated. Okay. And then you can do something about it.
Totally. So I'll divert here for a second. There's an episode of The Simpsons. I don't know if I know more than just about everyone, but certainly almost everyone about the first 10 seasons of The Simpsons. Anyway, so there's an episode with the gummy Venus de Milo, and Homer is supposedly, sexually harassed this. She's a babysitter, right? And that wasn't what he was doing. He's trying to get this famous piece of candy and all that stuff. And so there ends up being footage of this, and it's groundskeeper Willie, and he's the one that did the footage because he's a peeping Tom or whatever. And so Homer gets on this show, and then he gets, they re-edit it to make him look like a total psycho weirdo and all this. There's this big media hullabaloo, and he's just the most terrible dude in the world. And they've already made a made-for-TV movie starring Dennis Franz from NYPD Blue, and it's like this whole mess, right? That just happens in these situations because people just grab onto this stuff like vultures. The video finally comes out with groundskeeper Willie. We don't know who he is yet, but he shows the video and it like fixes the situation. Homer's no longer in trouble. And then immediately thereafter, there's a promo for the next video, which is like basically saying how bad groundskeeper Willie is for Wee Willie Peeper, I think they call him, for being the one walking around with the camera, getting all this stuff. And then Homer immediately turns on him. He's like shouting at the TV. He's like, that man is evil. And Marge is like, Homer, he just saved your life. And he's like, but Marge, listen to the music. Yeah. And so like, it's such a good encapsulation of how immediately we're made to feel a certain way just by the music or the lighting or whatever the situation is. And we just take it hook, line, and sinker. At least if for Homer, we buy into that shit immediately. Yeah. So I don't know. That's my favorite, is that show just has so much truth. It means so much of like, oh, that's how the world works.
And so many of us have watched it endlessly, and yet we're still making the same mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not even like, oh, I know what not to do now. You're like, oh, I see what I'm doing. Yeah, I suck. That's totally the problem that I previously understood was a problem. Oh, well. Yeah. You make your mistakes over and over until you
Oh.
finally don't keep making them, hopefully.
Yeah, we just keep trying. So, Justin, would you like to point people towards your website, your socials, so that they can find you and follow your work?
Yeah, certainly. brickmadnessmovie.com. That's an easy place to go. It's not fully updated, but it certainly can get you there. If you wanted to buy the movie right now, it's at littlesisterent.shop. And then you can find me on @JustinMakesMovies on Instagram. That might be a good way to approach all that. There's a million different ways to find me or anyone these days, and it's hard to keep track.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I mean, this is an excellent interview. I definitely got to talk about, I've done like dozens of these or maybe a dozen of these so far. And I think I got a little bit deeper into some stuff on this one than I did on other ones. So I'm very grateful that you provided the platform for that.
Well, it's been so lovely having you. I've been really looking forward to speaking to you, and thank you for accommodating our big time difference.
Oh yeah, no problem. Got me up out of bed. Anything that can make that happen is good. No problem at all.
It's so nice to connect with people so far away, but to just hear so many excellent stories and to learn so much about your practice and everything that you do. Thank you so very much, Justin. It's been brilliant.
You're very welcome. Yeah. Excellent.
This has been a Cozy Peapod production with me, Paula Blair. The music is Common Ground by Airtone, used under a Creative Commons 3.0 non-commercial license and is downloadable from ccmixter.org. Episodes release every other Wednesday. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your podcasts. See the show notes for a video link if you need auto captions. Be part of the conversation with AV Cultures on Facebook and Twitter, or AV Cultures Pod on Instagram. As well as Patreon membership, one-off support is appreciated at buymeacoffee.com/PEA Blair. I produce and edit the show by myself, and I am grateful for any support for this work. For more information and episode links, visit audiovisualcultures.wordpress.com. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you next time.